Some people might trickle in late. But before we started, I wanted to put this quote up there because I think it's really going to set the tone for this meeting. PLC has been working well to do whatever it takes to close the achievement gap in order to make certain no student falls through the cracks in the system. And I think we're all here because we agree that we think our ELL students are falling through that gap right now. Alright, so introductions. We all know each other, but let's just do it anyway, makes it fun. Say your name, how many years you've been teaching the subject you teach, and if you had a superpower, what would it be? I would go first. My name is Brittany. This is my 5th year of teaching. I teach Spanish, and if I had a superpower, I would be like Storm and control the weather so we can have a couple more snow days. Alright, we're going to move on. The objectives for today, we're going to identify why it's important to become proficient in ELL strategies. It's always important to identify the why. Everybody wants to know why it's important that I learn this. We're going to do that first. We're going to identify what's working and what's not. We're going to learn about the 6 principles of language learning. We're going to discuss access testing and your students' results, and then we're going to talk about and identify specific instructional practices that you can use in your classroom today. All right, I actually got this from our little meeting today. It's pretty cool. Are you feeling any of these particular things right now when it comes to your ELL students? You can just kind of look at it, pick the ones that you're thinking of. I'm sure we can all say yes to a couple of these. So we actually got this from our training today, and this chart really just lays out everything nicely. So if you're feeling confusion, it's probably because you don't have that set vision. You're not quite sure why we need to have these strategies or why we need this support. If you're feeling anxiety, it's probably because you're missing the skills that you need to communicate with these students. Resistance, I don't think anyone is resistant to teaching ELL students, but it might be because you don't see the point in changing things and trying to reach them. If you're frustrated, it's because you don't have those resources that you need to reach them. And false starts, where you have all these ideas but you just don't know how to get the game plan rolling. So success comes when you have all of these components. So basically we're going to kind of use this as a way to guide this PLC today, and we're going to hit all these different areas. So we're going to start with a vision. So here's some statistics on ELL students. Right now, in the past 15 years, ELL population has grown over 1 million students, which is crazy. There's almost 5 million ELL students right now in United States public schools. If you have 4 classrooms, at least 3 of them, there's going to be at least 1 ELL student in those classrooms. And I think all of you have ELL students right now, probably. Yeah, so they're everywhere. The most spoken language at home is Spanish, and right now all we have are Spanish ELLs. We don't have any Arabic or Chinese or any other languages right now. Because of this, there's an achievement gap. Unfortunately, you can see from the statistics right here, 62.6% of ELLs are graduating versus 82% of all students. And that's a huge gap for us. Research is showing that teachers say that they feel like they're lacking that quality instruction and development to be able to reach these students. And because of that, the gap continues to grow. I thought this was really interesting. Looking at their reading scores, in 4th grade, they were 37 points below non-reading ELL students. And by the time they reached 12th grade, they were 49 points below that. This just goes to show if we don't start intervening sooner, the gap is going to continue to grow. So what do they need? Obviously, they need some on-demand support, literary scaffolds, access to personalized learning, ability to work at their own pace, context-rich instruction, aka differentiation. Yay! You heard all about it through MTSS, and I love this quote right here. It's from one of the books I'm reading in school right now, and you can read it on your own. But basically, as teachers, we need to think about all of the things that could possibly hinder a student from learning, and that includes so many things, including their gender, their cultural background, their readiness to learn, their interests, what's happening in their home, the supports they're getting at school. So there's so many things as teachers that we need to think about when it comes to differentiation. So we've heard about differentiation before, and I'm briefly going to talk about this real quick. What can you change? So you can change the content. What is it that you're teaching, and how are you teaching it? Are you constantly in front of the class talking, or are you providing visuals that go along with it, or can they interact with the video? If you have an ELL student in your classroom and you're constantly talking in front of the class, imagine how much they're missing from what you're saying. You can change the process. These are the activities that they're doing in the class. So while my ELL student is doing an activity, I can easily change what activity that they're doing. I can tier that activity to make sure that he's getting the proper supports that he or she needs. The product. Sometimes it's always just a text, or sometimes it's always just a paper. There are options that you can include when it comes to differentiating a product by including maybe interview somebody. Instead of doing a paper on someone in history, you can create an interview where you are asking questions that relate to that person and you're answering as if you were that person. And then the environment. Is it constantly a whole class instruction, or can they partner off with into groups or do small groups, or are there separate settings? Additionally, to differentiate, you want to think about these following things about students. Their readiness. Obviously, are they ready to move on or do they need more time? So if you can look at those factors right there, you can go ahead and change your classroom and you can have the ones that are ready to move on to go to the next unit or try something else. Or, while you're doing that, you can work with the ones that aren't ready and provide them extra supports as needed. Interest, getting to know about your students. You gotta have that hook. They're gonna be more interested if it's something that makes more sense to them and something that they want to learn. And then the learning profile. This has to do with learning intelligence, multiple intelligences by Howard Gardner, and their learning style, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. So with all of these things put together, you can truly create a differentiated classroom. So let's see if you retained everything that I just said. So you're going to go to menti.com. All right, next activity. Let's talk about what's working and what's not working right now. Right now with your EL students, what are some things that you're doing in your classroom that work? And what are some things that don't work? And basically we're going to use this information to kind of guide the rest of this PLC when we start talking about our strategies, seeing which ones that we can actually use in our classroom and learn from each other to see which ones that we shouldn't really be. Alright, so in your folders you will see this handout. I made this handout using canva.com, so more tech tools for you to be able to use. I just took some information, made it all pretty, it was free, and I printed it out in the library for free. It is awesome to use. So this is one of the things that I wanted to share with you guys, because one of the reasons why I feel Suzanne and I have an easier time teaching the ELL students, not just because we speak their language, but it's because we know how to teach a second language. So these are the 6 principles of teaching a second language. So I printed these out for you because I wanted you to have them. And I think that understanding how to teach a second language is going to help you teaching these students in your classroom. So the first one is conversational language versus academic language. Conversational language is obviously, hey, how are you doing? You know, what did you eat for dinner? Where are you going this weekend? What they're going to pick up from their peers. Versus academic language. That is hypothesize, compare and contrast, you know, divide and multiply. Integers. I'm trying to pull up some words that I haven't used in a while. But so there's a difference between that, and knowing the difference is going to be very important for you while you're instructing, and knowing that it's going to be a lot harder for them and it's going to take them longer to pick up the academic language versus the conversational language. So we know that some of these ELL students can speak English, right? Because we know they're picking up some stuff. But when it comes to, then I can see people getting frustrated. Well, I know they understand what I'm saying, but they're not doing the homework. It's a different type of language being used. So just keep that in mind while you're teaching. Engage them with the content versus simply presenting it. Obviously, we all want to be able to do this, but instead of me just giving you information, if I can give you some hands-on things to do like we've been doing up here, ways for them to interact and engage the material, it's going to make it way more engaging and meaningful for them. So if you have whatever content area that you're in, if you can find a way to take that lesson and make it interactive, then you're going to see some more positive results. Social interaction and grouping. Like we talked about earlier, Vygotsky talks about it, it's called the zone of proximal development. He says that students learn more when they're paired with a more capable peer. So I briefly talked about this earlier, but if you have your higher level students, sometimes, you know, the best way to show that you're a master of something is to teach it. So they don't get bored, you can actually pair those higher level students with your EL students and kind of challenge them to teach them. That's not only going to help them cognitively grow, but it's also going to help those EL students kind of pick up that social language within that grouping setting. Even pairing partners or creating separate settings in your classrooms will be something helpful for your EL students as well. Prior knowledge and proficiency in the native tongue. So pre-assessments. If I'm going to teach, you know, about multiplication and they don't know how to properly subtract and add, it's going to be a concept that's way past them. So if you can do pre-assessments to figure out what is it that they know, and that way you know, do I have to give some background knowledge first, or can I go ahead and jump into this topic? And then proficiency in their native tongue. So the more that they are capable to speak and understand in their native tongue, the easier it's going to be for them to pick up a different language. So for example, Ronald, he missed several years of school. We don't really know the kind of background he came from. He is not picking up English quickly at all. And he's kind of retracting back from everything. He's not trying to engage. He's picked up, even in my Spanish class, he's not participating. Versus some of our other students like Medium and I think Johnny's doing a little bit better, but they have some stronger knowledge with their native tongue, and they're able to pick up these things a little bit more. So keeping that in mind, yes, they're understanding what you're saying, but there is a difference between, is it that academic language, is it conversational language, and how quickly can they pick up this new language. Classroom environment. I know for me in this classroom, this is something I have to focus on all the time. All of my kids are so afraid to speak in a second language because they don't want to talk like this in front of their friends, say hola. Buenos dias, right? And they get afraid, so I have to make sure that I'm cultivating an environment in here where they feel safe enough to speak out loud in a different language. So you just want to take a check at your classroom and make sure that you are setting up an environment where those ELL students feel comfortable to say something in English, and they don't feel afraid that their peers are going to laugh at them for something that they said. And then this one I think is very important, vocab and grammar specific to your content area. So when we do our lesson plans and when you're trying to plan your whole units, we've had to do this before within our PLCs, but if you can come up with those essential vocab words, those essential questions, and you can provide that as a list, those are small things that you can translate. And knowing, because the content and the vocab in science is going to be different from history, it's going to be different from a CTE class, it's going to be different from an English class. So if you can break down those grammar structures and vocabulary for them, that's going to help them a lot. Questions about this so far? Yes? No? No question?
I have one.
Yes.
So would you recommend on the, because like the I can statements or the essential questions, that might be something that we can provide at the administrative level. Would you recommend having the question in English and then the translation to give each one of them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would definitely be helpful. And then actually in the folder, we're going to go through this here in a second, is some I can statements that you guys can start using in classrooms right away. So, now that I've taught you how to teach a second language, I think you're already pros at a second language. And you actually know way more Spanish than you think because it's called cognates. Hello! Spanish cognates, they are words in English that look the same in Spanish. So you're going to go to Quizlet.live, and if you haven't played this yet, we're going to have some fun real quick. So you're going to type in this code, or if you have a QR reader, you can pull this in as well. We're going to move on to access testing. So I'm going to briefly talk about this. April will piggyback off wherever she feels necessary. But students who are ELL will get tested annually using the WIDA access test. And it's going to test them in these following language areas: social and instructional language, and the language of math, science, language arts, and social studies. The test assesses them in the 4 main language domains, which is listening, reading, writing, and speaking, and then they're given a score in each of those areas from 1 to 6, 1 being the lowest it could possibly be, and 6 is you're reaching, you're going above and beyond. These kids will continue to be in this program until they reach a score of 4.0 in reading and writing, and a score of 4.8 in their overall composite score. Do you want to add anything onto that? Just real quick, if you take a look at these documents, it shows you specifically what level these kids are at in each of these domains right here. And this is why I thought it was just like incredible, because she was talking about Ronald scores, and he scored a 1 on every single area. So if I'm asking my student to compare and contrast, that's a level 5 skill that I'm asking a level 1 to do. So I thought it'd be so important to give this to you, and thank you, April, for printing these, because you're going to be able to, I have some can-do statements that we're going to look at in a second. You're going to be able to take the levels that they're at and specifically provide instruction to that level, and then we're going to use that knowledge to help build them to these next levels. So if you look at this right here, this is going to be like a little mini Bible for you. So these are can-do descriptors. So if I have a student that's at level 1 and we're in reading, they're going to be able to match things and they're going to be able to sequence things. But that's only at level 1. So if I'm asking them to analyze, that's a level 5 skill right there. So if I'm looking at my student and I see that he's at a 6 at reading and listening, okay, so I'm not really going to focus on that, but his lowest level right now is a 2.4 in reading. So I'm going to look at the level that he's at, and I'm going to start differentiating and preparing my lessons and activities based off of what he can do. And as he starts to demonstrate proficiency in that level 2 area, I can then move on to that level 3 skill and try to build him up within those different areas. Okay? So this handout right here, I'm not sure if we'll have time to get to it because everything was taking longer than originally planned, but this is a blank matrix that you can use to pick any unit or lesson to try to start differentiating for those students. So essentially what you can do is you can put that standard up at the top and the skills that they're going to have to be able to do, and you're going to start at the level that they're in. So if I'm starting with my student, he's at level 2 right now, right? I can go look at my level 2 skills and put that he can identify right triangles, right? And I'm going to use those skills. Then I'm going to go ahead and pre-plan, all right, tomorrow or maybe in a couple days, I'm going to try to get him to level 3. Then you're going to go ahead and look at those level 3 descriptors and try to move him up within your specific content area, which is going to hopefully overall improve his listening, reading, and writing skills in all areas, so when you test again, we can try to get him out of the program. Okay? Questions about that? There are some resources that I want to show you guys later. This WIDA standards page is super awesome. It's where I got a lot of my information from. This is like a 200-page document. But if you're taking a look at this, it has it for every grade. Here we go. I think I can. Here you are. Boom. So it has examples of how to use this blank matrix and it has it for every single one of those different language areas of math, science, language arts, and social instruction. So here's an example for technology and ethics. So here's the connection and the example of how I'm going to have music and the cognitive function, and I'm just going to go ahead and lay out, all right, so this is what my student's going to be able to do at level 1 reading. And I'm going to go ahead and pre-plan, okay, level 2, I'm going to pick it from the can-do descriptors, and go ahead and write out what he should be able to do by level 2. And you may not get through all the way through level 5, but it's going to get you to start thinking about how will I change and plan things for this student, and the more that you do things like this, the second nature it's going to be. Once you do this around 1 or 2 students, you're going to know immediately, okay, I have his scores, he's at a level 3, he should be able to do this and this and this, this is how do I get him to level 5, okay? That make sense?
So another question for me, and I know there's a confidentiality issue, but I'm wondering if I could create a master one of these with all 17 kids and just put their name next to where they are on each
That would
one.
be so awesome.
And then I could just go through, and that way, even if I go through and mark out everyone but who you have, you still have a master one of these instead of having to have 8 pieces of paper.
Yep, that would be awesome.
But the math part isn't, I mean, it's not as specific on this one page.
It's not one of the, this is based off of those 4 domains,
But
which is
not
listening,
that,
reading,
okay.
writing, and speaking. Yep. Moving forward, some more practices and strategies that we talked about. You have 2 more handouts in your folder, and you can kind of read these on your own time, but I'll briefly explain them. One of the first, linguistically responsive pedagogical practices. Learn about the language and academic background of the ELLs in your classroom. So like we talked about earlier, know how strong and proficient they are in their native tongue. Use things like learning styles inventories and multiple intelligences to get to know who your students are so you can start planning your instruction to meet their needs. And then learn about them. You know, if you know they're from Honduras and Nicaragua, just do some research on your own. And when you do things like this, then not only are they going to improve relationships with you, but they're going to feel more welcome and invited into your classroom. We talked about this briefly. Identify the language demands inherent in your classroom tasks. So if I'm asking, once again, compare and contrast, I'm going to need to identify those words. I might need to translate those main objectives that I want them to do, providing essential questions, essential vocabulary, what is it the outcome that I want you to do. Those kind of things are going to be important to translate versus just translating an entire document for them. Like we talked about using the standard matrix, utilize Bloom's taxonomy to help get them to the next level. And then the last one, scaffold that learning. Some of the biggest things that you can do, visual support. So if I'm wanting a student to list out the steps of doing something, maybe add a picture of a staircase or a ladder. If I'm wanting them to, guess a question, you can put like a question mark. So utilizing visuals in your classroom. Something else that you can do, make sure you're talking slower and you're being explicit with your instruction. Instead of turning around this way, saying it is what you need to say, and then turning back around. So when it happens, you know that they're going to miss something. Even more visuals, write those instructions up on the board. Something else that you can do is you can print out the lesson that you're doing or the objectives of the day, and you can hand that to them, and you can point to it as you're doing something in class so they know where you are in class and how to keep up with what you're doing. Pairing them with students, getting them engaged with the content, providing a translation buddy, and hands-on activities. So you can read these at your own time. I'm going to speed it just a little bit because I'm running out of time. But if you have any questions about how to utilize these techniques or strategies in your classroom, please just let me know. Any questions on this? Take one unit, or you can even take one lesson. And I want you to remember, we talked about what we can change. I can change how I'm teaching and what I'm teaching. I can change the activities that they're doing. I can change how they show me that they have actually learned something. And I can change how they're interacting with the in the environment. I can take into account if they're ready to move on or if they need more time, how interested are they in this, or including something that makes it interesting to them in their learning profile. Think about what we've already identified as things that do and don't work. Utilize those axis scores. You look at the levels that they're at, look at these can-do descriptors, and they're easy enough for you to say, okay, he can point to something and tell me yes or no. Or if I want to get him to level 2, he can circle and make a full sentence. And remember, you're not alone. So if you wanted to, you can do this. If you want to send it back to me, I can look over it with you and see if this is the kind of the right steps that you're going through. If you need any more help with that, you just need to let me know. So the coolest thing about this is it translates conversation, text, and voice in real time across multiple devices, across multiple languages. So if I'm up here, it's even a plugin that you can download, and you can ask the IT department for a microphone. So if you're giving presentations, there's an add-in that you can use for PowerPoint. You just have a little mic right here, and as you're talking, it translates it for your students on their screen into English. And if they need to ask you questions, they can type a question in Spanish, and it translates it back to you immediately in English. So you sent me a message and it immediately translated for me in Spanish.
Wow, that's awesome.
Super, super awesome. So Brittany, same thing. I say something that you would to your students normally in the classroom. Alright. Last but not least, this is a whole list of resources for you. These are all online resources for you. This is a whole Google slide. I'm going to send it to you guys if you want it so you can see all the supplemental activities that I did. But here's a brief description about what all these are. There's some really cool stuff in here like we talked about Quizlet. Spanish Dict is my favorite translator versus Google Translate. There are some things on here that specifically have videos that translate into Spanish. That comes with accompanying quizzes so you don't have to make anything up. There's a website called sharemylesson.com where the people have already shared thousands of lessons for ELL learners, so you don't have to create anything on your own. There's tons of resources out there and they're free. So if you want to give these a look and kind of browse around. Something else I gave you are some helpful words and phrases that you can start learning. Obviously, these kids are probably going to feel a little bit alone in the country that no one really speaks their language. So if you can, even just one day, like one phrase a week, say something to them in their own native language, they're going to start opening up to you. They're going to want to work harder for you because they see that you're working to try to get to know them. Yeah. Other than that, does anybody have any questions? That didn't look the same on my computer, but I ended with the same quote that we started with. When we work together, we're trying to close that achievement gap to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. So I thank you guys so much for coming today. You guys are true leaders to trying to make a change. You see that there's an issue. We really do need to make a change. So thank you for this. If you have any